Thank you for that. Hi everyone, I'm Ian Fales from Befores and Afters magazine, and I don't need to introduce these guys because it's already happened. But thank you for coming.
Say some nice things about us anyway, just to...
Just joking, Tim. I just wanted to tell you quickly about what we might do today. We're just going to have a bit of a freewheeling conversation about production. Both Tim and Gretchen have so much production history. They're going to give a lot of insights. And if you know Tim Miller, you know you're going to get some really cool details, I think. But I want to leave some time for questions at the end. So please think of things you might want to ask them both, with about 15, 20 to go. But yeah, thanks for coming and filling the room. That's really good of you.
And I apologize in advance. We don't have any eye candy for people to watch here. It's just us.
That's
but
Tim's fault.
Hopefully you've seen it before. I didn't want to show Love, Death, and Robots again and again, or Blur's Real. But thank you for coming anyway. Hopefully it's not going to be that technical, but hopefully it'll keep you guys interested anyway.
I think people know, Tim, what you've been up to in the very past couple of years with Love, Death and Robots, but do you want to give like a really brief history about Blur, your film directing and Love, Death, and just how those things intertwine and keep intertwining?
Like a lot of people here at SIGGRAPH, I just wanted to be in the industry because I fell in love with computer graphics because I thought it was probably the greatest art tool ever invented. I wanted to be an illustrator or a comic book writer. And then I touched a computer and I thought, ooh, I'm not that smart, but this is f***ing cool. And so I just got sucked into making pretty pictures on computers. And as technology got better and better, my aspirations got bigger and bigger. And then eventually, through no entrepreneurial spirit, but just a willingness to not be told what to do, I started Blur with some other artists, and the point of that was really, I don't give a shit about money or anything like that. I just felt that as an artist, if I wanted a chance to control what I actually worked on, the best way to do that was to own my own company. So if I wanted to lose money in order to do better work, I could make that choice. And business people don't make that choice. You can't make it all the time, or you won't be a business person for long. But I wanted that ability to control that. And then, you kind of bring people into the cult, and then it gets bigger and it changes to be something other than what you thought. But it's still a worthy journey. And then at some point, I was such a socialist. I didn't like taking the title of director at Blur because I feel that title unnaturally concentrates credit in one person when computer graphics, more than a lot of things, is sort of a team sport. Until some of the other guys wanted to be directors, and then I said, well, f*** it, I'm not gonna not be director if they get to be directors. So I started taking it.
That's awesome. And I mean, Tim, I followed your career so closely with cinematics and visual effects work, but then, was so excited with Deadpool and Terminator. And I think people, have seen those films, but the thing that they know most about you at the moment is Love, Death and Robots. How did that happen? And, what's the future plans with it as well?
Is that true? Love, Death, and Robots? You think it got a bigger cheer at Comic-Con, which I was proud of, honestly, because Deadpool's not my IP, and Terminator's not my IP.
What got a bigger cheer?
Love, Death, and Robots got, yeah.
Oh, right. They didn't cheer.
No, that wasn't a shameless request for praise. It was.
Yes, it was.
I'm genuinely, not for me, because I don't care. For the studio, right? All of this is to bring recognition to the studio, in a lot of ways. So anyway, how did that happen? Love, Death, and Robots happened because I met David Fincher, and it was a game project. He wanted to do a game about what happens if an 8.0 earthquake hits Los Angeles and you're a FedEx guy and you're trapped in an elevator. That's where the game starts. And we were going to do a demo, sort of a pre-rendered version to demo the game. And David just liked the way we ran the studio. We became friendly, which is odd because he and I are not alike at all. I'm pretty crass and he's fairly sophisticated. But we became friends, and we started looking for projects to do together, and I said, I want to make a new heavy metal magazine. I'm going to make a new heavy metal movie, which had been a big influence on me as a young animator. And David said, I can set that up in 2 weeks. Cut to 12 years later, when we finally got a chance with an iteration of it, because we went to Netflix, where Fincher had, basically built their business, and he said, look, this is what I want to do, and I showed Blur's reel, and they said, yeah, we're willing to take a risk on that, although the algorithm doesn't tell us it will be successful, so here's the parameters under which you can undertake this risk. And that's what Love, Death, and Robots was.
Oh, that's awesome. Gretchen, coming to you, you're now the Director of Visual Computing at AWS, but you have such a long history at ILM. I sort of want to talk about how you got to where you are now as well.
Sure. Well, I knew I always wanted to be in the entertainment industry in some way, and so I started on the East Coast in a miniature model shop. I had taken my resume around New York alphabetically, which was strange, and got a job at Aoki Studios. And Aoki had worked with Doug Trumbull on some of those big rides, Back to the Future ride.
I just ran into somebody out there who said, Gretchen was my coordinator on a project back in New York.
Don't tell anyone. And so I made my way into digital effects in New York, and then made my way to California and ILM, and just had good fortune, made some good choices, worked really hard, and my first job at ILM was in production in the Sabre department, and we did what George Lucas had finished episode 1, and he wanted another 300 shots done for the special edition, the DVD release, sorry. And so we did another 300 shots that summer for the DVD release, my colleague Pablo Hellman and I, he's a VFX soup, and we were moved on to episode 2 as one of the units for Attack of the Clones. And that's kind of where it all began. And then from there, I just had, increasingly more responsibility in production. And when I got to the end of my career at ILM in late 2020, I was global head of production. And we had expanded into 5 cities around the world. And, the industry I saw change over those 23 and a half years quite a bit. And then obviously the cloud was a big part of that change, which is what drew me to AWS.
Brilliant. Now, am I right in thinking you have sort of worked together, both of you?
Not sort of, very much so.
Oh, right. Well, we need some stories about that.
I'll just tell you quickly, when I first met Tim, I went to his office at Blur in LA, and I think I was an exec producer in charge of new business at the time. And I went with John Knoll, you probably know that name, small guy, invented Photoshop. And we sat in the backyard of Tim's place in Venice, Culver City, and
It was Venice then.
Venice, okay. Just had a nice chat with Tim. I was kind of in sales mode, and Tim basically was like, come on, you don't have to sell me. I get it. But that was kind of our first interaction. I was like, okay, I got to read this guy a little better. But since then, we crossed paths a few times, but the last time was, when ILM was awarded a big chunk of the work on Terminator Dark Fate. And
And I fulfilled a bucket list of mine to be able to boss around people at ILM. And they would have to listen to me despite me being completely underqualified to tell them what to do. It was great. Yeah. But Gretchen's right. We've known each other for a while. She very short-sightedly passed up an opportunity to do a film for the first version of Love, Death, and Robots.
No.
I don't want to say it was a mistake.
It was a mistake.
But it was a big mistake. And she has been sort of on the front lines of, for anybody who doesn't know, part of the visual effects job is to say, hey, that looks good, what if we did that? And then the other 99% is how can we get it faster? What can you cut? Or who's got to die to get these shots done? So there was a lot of interaction with Gretchen and with ILM doing the bulk of the shots, which was really weird for me because I had built my whole studio on the idea that fuck those big studios. We're going to be small and lean and mean, and we're going to do stuff much faster and more efficiently than them. But when it comes to like churning out massive numbers of shots in a short amount of time, it's pretty hard to beat.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to beat ILM.
Well, and
they did a really fantastic job, with the exception of the John Connor face. But
you had to go there.
But there's a big story there.
Can I just say, if anyone here is from ILM and worked on Dark Fate, they get the first question. I'll put that out there.
Definitely. I don't think we want to talk about it that much anymore.
Just joking.
Yeah, we do.
No,
Yeah,
it was
we
fine.
do.
You know, honestly, I felt like, working with Tim, and, he puts himself down a lot in ways, but he's the kind of filmmaker that you want to work with because he's so collaborative. People come to ILM because they can collaborate at a pretty high level with our key creatives, or their key creatives. I don't work there anymore. And Tim is really like, he'll take any phone call, he'll listen to any idea. He really just wants to put the best pictures on the screen, and that's what ILM was all about. And I think that showed ultimately.
It was great.
That's awesome intro. I didn't know a lot of that information, so I'm so glad to be here myself. We are here to talk about production, and I think both Tim and Gretchen have such a wealth of experience in how things have changed, in 20 years, 30 years. I want to talk to you both about that. Tim, when you're first starting Blur, what was a pipeline? How did shots get done? How quickly did that change, or has it been actually a really slow change to where we are today?
No, well, it seems radical, but at the glacial pace of life, it feels like it's been a long time. But the first, I borrowed $20,000 from my wife's grandfather, and we bought 3 P90s. I think they may have been P60s. No network. Our first network came like 6 months later, when we had a 4 gig. Hard drive for all our network, so it was backing up on 200 megabyte Colorado drives, and it was pretty sad, but also awesome, and because it was ours, and we were doing our own thing. And our first job was a Columbia logo, where for the Net, that Sandra Bullock movie, and a little cursor came in and clicked on the Columbia logo, and it fizzed out, which I used some off-the-shelf image processing thing to do. I love tools, and I would search the net all the time for the latest plugins, and I love doing putting different tools together with Max and compositing. And I was just talking, I ran into the Digital Fusion guy, Steve Roberts, yesterday. We bought the DOS version of Digital Fusion,
Wow.
and it was pretty amazing back then.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't get that feeling, I feel like, anymore, because the rate of change was so shocking and exciting back then. I could be wrong, but it feels a little more like we expect awesomeness rather than are surprised by awesomeness, which I felt like was a almost monthly occurrence. And SIGGRAPH was the place. I went to my first one in Vegas in 90, 91. And it was a place where you came to see the latest and greatest work, and it was so inspiring for the whole year.
Absolutely. Gretchen, what have you seen change in a big way at ILM, but also now you're at AWS in terms of production?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly, we can talk about the explosion of content creation, right, given episodics and all the new channels and streaming platforms. But in 2008, when the stock market crashed in the United States, the budgets got really different scrutiny at studios, and it was much harder to make movies. The notion of better, faster, cheaper always existed, but I think it stepped it up to a large degree after that time when financing was really hard to get. But then came the advent of tax credits globally. I mean, I think everybody's aware of that: Canada, UK, Australia, et cetera. And so the spreading out of the workforce globally, and the opportunity too with technology. Everybody had access to the tech, and now we all had access to great talent everywhere. The pandemic obviously exposed that even more, and so the ability to work globally with people anywhere was fast-tracked, and I think in a very positive way. Some of the tech is still catching up, and certainly having data available to people where they are when they need it. That's a big challenge still, but I do think that the obvious explosion of content production is the biggest change in the last 5 to 10 years. But I think that comes with a huge amount of opportunity.
I'm a little less keen on the pandemic-related changes, mostly for the younger generation coming into the studios. I feel like you having to be around other people who had experience that you could just learn from by standing next to their desk or having them come over and open your file was a very different experience than what I'm seeing on Zoom. Certainly the senior folks are enjoying being able to walk their dog at any time during the day, but I don't feel like it's gonna do the industry justice in the long run. But I also realize that I'm 57, and I could be thinking that because I'm old.
Well, but I will say, even when we opened studios globally, it was hard to expand, and people were going to the office. It was hard to, expand that culture of ILM and to expand the knowledge of people like John Knoll, into different cities around the world. So even with people going to the office, but I agree with you 100%.
I mean, there was a dude.
Super hard.
I went to the Epic thing yesterday, and this dude came up to me and said, I work for you. And I said, okay. I mean, it was embarrassing and awkward for me. But I, the little face on Zoom, if you don't have any time, or better yet, haven't suffered with them, because I am a believer in teams bonding through just a little bit of mutual suffering. I don't remember the projects that went easy. I remember the projects that were hard.
But the other thing is, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, Tim, your desk is out in the middle of the studio, right? Like with the artists.
I'm a socialist by heart.
But I'm guessing you missed that a lot during COVID lockdown.
I was not alone in a 25,000 square foot man cave for 2 years.
You kept going in, but no one else could.
I did kept going in because it was important in my marriage.
We went. We went to visit Tim for a little. A few of us from AWS went to visit Tim, and he literally was alone in the building. And I've been to Blur when it's packed and buzzing and people all around. And poor Tim, he was so excited, I think, to have people there. And we spent almost 2 hours looking at footage and talking about his projects.
Yeah, most of the excitement I was getting was, hey, can someone do a hard reboot of Ripper 12 on the second floor? Because nobody else was there. And sometimes you just can't reboot the machines remotely.
I'm going to get to, though, something about new tools and cloud and what the pandemic maybe has pushed and done quickly. But you did mention before you love tools. That's what I remember about Blur as well. You guys jumping on 3D Max, 3ds Max, a renderer that I can't remember the name of as well.
V-Ray? Well, I mean, we've used a bunch. It's Mental Ray, V-Ray.
Yeah.
Brazil, you're
Brazil,
probably talking, which came out of, came out of our tools guys, yeah.
But you are a bit of a tool freak, but I think, what have you, well, what's...
Because I can't be on the box anymore, much to my disgust.
Are there tools, though, recent ones, that you have seen being used by your artists or out there that have got you excited?
Oh, I think Unreal and Unity, the real-time tools, which have been threatening to be the quality enough to do the pre-rendered level of quality, I feel like that's finally here. And just like I kind of rode the wave of PCs and low-cost 3D programs, I think this is going to be a game changer for. You don't need a render. You don't need to render machines. You can do it all at home. And I'm seeing people in their bedrooms at home do film quality work. And I mean, I think there's gonna be so many artists emerging from just having access to the tools that I'm pretty fucking excited about that. I mean, the better the artist pool, the better the work we're going to be able to do, because, like I said, it's a team sport. And I think the Unreal and Unity and those kinds of tools are really going to change the game for us. All those people can't go into games. Some of them are going to go into storytelling, which can be increasingly gamified in different ways if we're all working with tools that can kind of go across multiple sort of delivery end goals, right? There's no reason why the stories we want to tell in Love, Death, and Robots can't become games themselves in some way much easier if the assets are all already built.
Sure. Actually, Gretchen, I should ask you the same question. What have you seen in recent years that's got you excited?
Well,
tool-wise?
of course, Unreal. I mean, not, kind of, as Tim would say, it's going to enable so much, from artists everywhere. I think that's partly why, a small plug here for Nimble Studio. Nimble Studio that AWS acquired a few years ago was founded by, Rex Grignon from DreamWorks Animation in order to, make the accessibility to technology more democratic and allow people who don't have a big IT infrastructure and a machine room to get on and start making pictures and telling stories. And I think that's the biggest thing to me, is being able to tell stories that weren't able to be told before. You said the other day, Tim, 20 years ago, you could have never told Love, Death, and Robots, right? So I think that's the exciting part for me, is how the tools are enabling, and people everywhere. I see animation, I'm on the academy, and I rate, student films, and some of the things that are coming out of these students around the world is just astounding on a tech level. So they're really, taking full advantage of what's out there, and I'm really excited to see how that morphs and changes.
I think that I am slightly here to pimp AWS, but I will say that the Nimble Studio stuff is super cool. Like, for instance, Hibaro or The Witness, if you've seen LDR, Alberto Mieglo is an amazing artist, but he didn't have a studio like I have Blur, and he really didn't want to partner with a studio. He felt like it was important to build his own, which was, we supported that, and it was a major ordeal for them to build the technical infrastructure and the software pipeline, obviously, from scratch to do something as difficult as Hibaro and The Witness was. But the promise of Nimble is that we could build that studio for him, and it's just a question of dollars. In theory, pipelines could come with it, so that you don't have to build your own, and I think people could be up and creating content much more quickly, even if they're working at scale, and it's not guys at home or girls at home in their bedrooms.
It's interesting to me, because I think the pandemic meant that we were all working from home and remotely, but actually it was already happening, wasn't it, with things like Studio in the Cloud, Gretchen? Like, it was already a thing set up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it wasn't as what's the word, advanced as it is now, I think, because a lot of people we had working from home at ILM. I know others did too, but most of the time they would come to the office, at least a few times a week. So yes, but I think now it's more of a must-do, right, rather than a can-do. And so to build the tools and to support content creation with that new paradigm, it's really important to AWS. And that's the one thing that we care about, is making it faster, making everything faster to make pictures. If we could give Tim the tool, or artist the tools to give Tim 3 more takes, then he can, make it that much better.
You can, Gretchen.
I do.
If you just give me greater access to.
But
all of those CPU cycles on AWS just sitting there, like non-peak hours.
They're not just sitting there.
They are just sitting there, Gretchen. They are just sitting there. You build all this infrastructure for peak hours, and what does it do the rest of the time? It just sits there. I could use it. I could use it to render. All our partners on Love, Death, and Robots would make the art so much better.
This is certainly what we're talking about, Tim. I mean, we hear you. We hear you loud.
But it's time to move beyond the talk into action.
I have colleagues at Amazon Studios that will be following up with immediately after this meeting,
saying we have to get rid of this guy as quickly as possible.
You just mentioned rendering, though, Tim. That's an interesting point too. Like, we've talked about recently how things like the cloud and AWS, it's not just rendering, like it can help in the early pre-pro stage. I think you were quite excited about how that can speed up production too, right?
Which part were you talking about?
Well, a lot of people think about cloud and it's only used for rendering, but
which I think the real-time stuff will change that paradigm a bit. So we hope, but go on.
I think there's a side of cloud virtualization and use of cloud virtual machines and whatnot.
Oh, I know what were you talking about, like managing people?
Yes.
Is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, even at our studio, a lot of times rendering and machine usage is thought about in terms of costs, right? Oh, we're going to have a window license, or we're going to have how much is it going to cost to render these things? And it's absolutely a factor, but what a lot of people don't think about is the artist side or the business side is how much less productive are artists if they have to wait 2 days to get their renders back? How much less productive are look development artists if they have to wait 2 hours for a render? How much more productive would they be if they could see it almost instantly? And then there's the longer term tail of that, which is artists that get frustrated and they leave, and then you have to replace them and the cost of that. So it behooves everyone to have a really fluid pipeline. Although I know from, one of my first jobs in the industry was at a place that made medical films. So if you had, let's say, a sexually transmitted disease, your doctor would say, sit down and watch this film about it, which the first film I directed was So You Have an STD. And they were great, but I went from a 256 color Dubner graphics machine to a 16 million color box that was 4 times faster, and my boss said, so you can do 4 times as much work, right? And I said, well, I don't think 4 times faster, and the work can be better now. And the net result was I was doing better work in more or less the same time because I could make it look a lot better. So there is rate limiting factors, which is people can only work so fast, and creative thought takes time. It's not always limited by machines, but wherever it is limited by machines, I want to get that out of the way, right? But you start to look at how you can make the artist more productive and more happy. Not because I really care about artists. It's not that. I don't. It's because the happy artists produce better work.
I think what Tim's alluding to is, as I kind of said before, making tools, our content tools service team or product team at AWS is focused on making tools that help the artists work faster and more efficiently. And I think there's I said before, Tim could get 3 more takes, but we could also do it in 1 more take and save a little money, right? So there's benefits from both the production business side as well as the creative. And it is in an effort of better, faster, cheaper, if you think about it that way. But more so, I think, is really it's all the things Tim is saying, keeping those artists happy and productive. Artist downtime is the worst nightmare of a producer. And so you really want to just keep that flow going. And the cloud enables that. And also then, we've been talking with Tim about what happens when they relocate, right? He doesn't want a new machine room, if I could say that publicly. Yeah. He doesn't want to build a new machine room. He doesn't need to get extra real estate or people to manage it. And, I think that's another great offering that we provide.
Air conditioning technicians are pretty much on staff at Blur to keep our render farm cool. It's like, I you not. It's like every day the air conditioning breaks. And you don't want to do that. And you don't want to waste people's time doing that when they could be creating content.
Yep.
And I just want to say we've got a surprise screening of So You've Got an STD. Just a bit. No, sorry.
It was, if I can say so, it was brilliant.
Is it on YouTube?
It was a masterwork.
Is it on YouTube?
No.
Have you got it somewhere? Is it on your reel?
I don't think I do have it somewhere. But I was talking to one of our Alex Beatty, one of our directors at Blur, who's like, I don't know, 34, and he was saying, "Oh, I wish this thing I just did had been better," and et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, let me show you what I was doing when I was 34. And I mean, it was pathetic. I mean, I knew it was pathetic when I was going to show it to him, but I didn't realize how pathetic it was until I actually called it out of the Blur archive, and it's embarrassing. But at the time, I thought it was the coolest thing, ever. Yeah. There's some perspective for you over time.
Look where you are now.
I know, which you know what you forget. That's when you're shooting a Terminator movie. Every once in a while, you go, "Oh, I'm shooting a Terminator movie," and you forget about that in the process of just doing it.
I wanted to ask you, Tim, about at Blur, you're managing your own projects. It might have been a cinematic or a visual effects project or a short film. With Love, Death and the Robots, there's obviously partner studios. I'm not sure what you call them, refer to them as, or...
That works.
There you go.
Depends how well they're doing.
I'm really curious how you communicate with them. What kind of reviews you do of their idea, their progress. Like, how do you continue that communication during production?
I can honestly say that in the season 1 going into it, I had a little bit more of a kumbaya attitude. to it, and I thought, oh, we'll listen to people's pitches, and we'll let animators come and tell us their dream jobs. And that lasted about 4 months. And then I just realized that we had to take a more active hand. And it's difficult for directors to produce sometimes because it's hard not to go, well, I would do it this way. And that's not really what you want to do. The whole idea is that these are expressions of vision that feel unique and different. And so where we ended up with in season 1 and further seasons is I really try and give everyone a good script. Blur handles, we pick the stories, with the exception of Alberto's, we pick the stories and we develop the scripts and we give them to the companies. And the directors are welcome to change them to make them better, but they're not allowed to change them to make them worse. And you could say how, well, it's so subjective, and it's not really. It's subjective. There are some things that fall into the subjective category, and some things that are surprising in that you think it's not going to work, and it really does. So it's a very gray area, but I think you can see the things that are patently wrong. And so it's our job to kind of set the bar for where the quality is and then help everybody get there. And Jennifer Yu Nelson, who was a supervising director, she did Kung Fu Panda, she's f***ing amazing. She's very mentoring, very helpful. She got a great eye. She can kind of play any instrument in the band. And so different directors come in with different levels of skill or different skill sets, and then she can kind of jump in and she can do storyboards or do whatever. And she is the front line of that now, because I might go shoot a movie or something like that. And then, but I really grip hard on that story part up front. And I feel like if I give people a good story, then it'll eventually be all right.
Yes. Well, they have been amazing stories. I'm curious, though, is it very much traditional jump on Zooms and review calls during, as they're working on it? Or is there some kind of other pipeline installed to review things?
lots of Zooms. Jen and Jerome Denjon, who's our head of VFX on the show since we started, they are kind of the first line of quality control and review. But directors send us their vision for the scripts, and we take a look at that. And then there is a lot of Zooms. I tend to get on when things are not going well because people are afraid of me. But I'm nice, really. But I get on, and when you kind of I'm not afraid to hurt people's feelings, even though it's not what I'm trying to do. Some people, I feel like most people in the long run appreciate just being told the truth, even if it hurts. I know I do. And so I'm usually the guy that does that. But it's a lot of sync sketch, too. We use the out of sync sketch. It's a lifesaver.
Yeah, right. I'm going to jump to something that is always a little bit precarious, which is thinking about the future. I mean, I think you both identified the real-time way that the industry is going. But in terms of also production, how big productions are handled, any other way of working that you think will happen in the next 4 or 5 years? Gretchen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you've already seen the advent of virtual production, and we started that. It started long ago, but the large-scale usage of virtual production, meaning the LED walls, we started on Mandalorian 1, season 1, and. Okay, sorry. ILM started and Lucasfilm, and now those walls are going up all over the world, and really helps production so much. Not traveling to locations with a big crew, being able to. It changes the way production's done. You have to make decisions way ahead of time, right, about what you're going to put on those walls, and hopefully not change.
Or do you?
Yeah. Well, see, that's what he's.
Yeah.
This is what's going to happen.
We try, but it does force you because the assets have to be built earlier. and that I think is.
Or do they?
They do. Director Tim.
I keep hearing stories of like, yeah, well, we shot it in the volume, and then we just wrote the characters out, changed the background, which is like,
that's
doubly bullshit.
But you hope you work with people like you who do make decisions soon, early. But I think that is only going to get better because now they're starting to put characters in the backgrounds of those things. That first it was just environments, and even effects will start going in, dust and smoke and things. So that's a game changer. Using it in television as well. Television typically has really small budgets compared to feature films, and I don't mean streaming. I mean like ABC, and they those budgets are really being helped by this virtual production technology, and we're at AWS working on tools for that as well. And so that's kind of the biggest one. But again, it's trying to bring people closer together, share files globally. I mean, that's only has to get better, and that is still a challenge, right? Because we would have to mirror data from San Francisco to London, and that would take time. And people want that data like when they need it immediately. And now, of course, there's a 24-hour work cycle, so in the middle of the night in London, someone probably doesn't need it when we need it in San Francisco. But I think it's really exciting. I think there's so many. Well, again, I'm going to repeat myself. The stories that can be told now that just couldn't before, and largely due to technology and increased capabilities by people and skill sets.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why I said it was precarious, because now I'm going to ask Tim the same question. Tim, future hat on.
What? AI. If anybody is not scared shitless by Midjourney and just go to Fusion, tell me how you manage that. We're losing hundreds of hours a week to we have a chat, and every 5 minutes I see new Midjourney images pop up, and they're beautiful. But anyway, I feel like the future is, I used to want to build an empire, a dark Pixar that did adult animation, but I don't really feel like empire building anymore, because I feel like you can connect the world in a different way. And what Love, Death, and Robots, it kind of proved a model of working with a lot of smaller, I would say boutique studios in the 100 to 50 to 150 range. Which I like these folks, and they're like-minded, and they're artists first rather than business people, I think, and it's a way of working. Now it's possible to harness these folks to a single goal. I mean, Love, Death, and Robots, an anthology, is easier because each one is unique and they can be self-contained. But we have some larger projects on the horizon, I'm hoping, that get through the bureaucracy of Amazon, that are
studios, not AWS.
No, they will. They're all just great. They really are. They really are. No, I mean that. You think I'm being?
Does mean it. Yeah,
I do that. I do mean that. But they're bigger projects that have to have a homogeneity across them, and they're big swings, and they're really interesting projects that'll take all the technology that we feel is on the horizon. Like the big question I asked at the Epic seminar yesterday is a question I would like to ask. I'm asking myself, which is, I want to be able to sit down and say, this project has a 2-year life cycle. This is where we need to be. Can the software handle that? Are we going to be there? Will you have good, decent cloth and hair simulation in real time, 12 months from now, when I have to start hitting the render button? And if you can have those conversations, you can start building a pipeline, not just where you are, but around where you want to be. And it doesn't have to be this monolithic. I mean, back in the old days, if you weren't ILM, you couldn't afford to do those kind of bigger projects because the infrastructure was just too huge.
Yeah, the investment. I do want to just backtrack. I whispered AI to Tim, but AI/ML is a huge leap forward as well, and will be for the industry, for the post-production industry.
AI what?
Machine learning, AI/ML, and those tools that can not only automate and predict processes, but also facial imagery, for example, and just all kinds of things that will take a little bit less hand work to be done, at least to get you to an 80% point maybe. But that's definitely going to be a game changer. And those programs that Tim mentioned, shocking. I mean, how many people have seen Disco Diffusion or Mid-Journey and stuff that they,
Everybody, yeah.
I mean, you have to admit it's something we've never seen, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I totally agree as well. I think that's all the time we've got. Guys, thank you so much for coming along. Can you please thank Gretchen and Tim?
Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much.